The Outsider podcast shares the opinions and analyses of Drew Landry. They are his thoughts, and his thoughts alone, and do not necessarily reflect every member of his audience or newsletter readers. Now, on with the show.
Hey, welcome into another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry. And folks, thank you so much for joining the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the great state of Texas, and being with me at this time, wherever you are, however you are listening, and when you are listening. I really do appreciate your audience. I really appreciate your listenership, and thank you for joining me in this ride. Now, in today's episode, I have the Trot Around the Bases, where I go around four main topics, four main issues that I felt were maybe not necessarily discussed throughout the week. Maybe they were, but I really think that they needed more attention than what they got. And my main topic for today, we get into the gerrymandering as it continues across the entire country and how that happened in the old Dominion state of Virginia. Before I get into all that, though, just a quick plug for the Outsider newsletter and this particular podcast that you're listening to, the Outsider Podcast. Folks, please go find me on Substack. You can be a free subscriber to the Outsider newsletter. You get something maybe once or twice a week, and that's all that I bug you with. You just go to the Outsider newsletter there on Substack, and you just become a free subscriber. And I'll actually put the link into this episode once you see this, and you'll be able just to click and you'll be able to add your email. Now, you can also subscribe to the Outsider Podcast on Apple Podcasts, okay, on Spotify, on Substack, and even on YouTube, where you are going to see the video version that I'm recording. You see my beautiful face as I'm smiling, and the sources of news clips that I add to each and every segment that I make. Just so you know, I'm not making this stuff up, but I'm just winging stuff like you find from other podcasts that deal with politics. And so it's important that we cite our sources. And that's what I tell my students, that you have to be able to do something like that. So that's exactly what I do here. Now, that out of the way, let's get into the trot around the bases. And so with first base, we get into the presidential approval numbers. And folks, President Trump's approval ratings, they are not good, even in the slightest. When we look at three particular main averages, all right, we look at Real Clear Politics, we look at the Cook Political Report, and we look at the New York Times. And so when we do that, we start with the Real Clear Politics. We'll see here that the president's approval ratings, he's at a 40.5% approval average. All right. I mean, just several polls from just the last week, from the last few weeks, from the beginning of April, he has been consistently underwater. And that, honestly, is been his entire presidency. I mean, there was a time in 2025, all the way up to about mid-March, to where he actually had some positivity. He was above water. But it didn't take long for that to go nowhere. So that's with Real Clear Politics. Average, whenever I'm recording this, he has an average approval rating of 40.5%. His average disapproval is 57.7%. The highest disapproval, his highest unapproved number, came from the Associated Press and the NORC, National Opinion Research Center's survey, where 33%, only a third of Americans, of respondents here, said that they approved of the job he was doing, meaning 2/3 said they didn't like it. And this has been a trend of just some bad numbers, and that's from Real Clear Politics in and of itself. Now, if we look at the Cook Political Report, the very nonpartisan CPR, Cook Political Report, not the life-saving tactic, the president's approval is about the same as that as Real Clear Politics. It's about 40.1% on the average. And if we were to dive deeper with this, his best numbers truly come from non-college white voters, where his best approval is 49.4%. It's half. 50% is the average who disapprove of the president. Again, this is from the Cook Political Report. Independents, the ones who pretty much make up these elections, who decide these results, his approval rating is dismal. It's just awful. We're talking about the average approval of 27.9%. That's not something anybody would ever want in any sort of situation. But that's from the Cook Political Report. Now let's look here at the New York Times. The most recent was when I recorded this, which was Friday, April 24th. His approval rating is at 39% on average, and that meaning that his disapproval is almost 60%. It's at 58. Folks, this has been just not a good, year and a half of the president's time in office. Now, he got right to it. I mean, he came into office, he wanted to do a lot of things, and he started out, within the first, maybe month and a half of his approval ratings, being above water. I mean, the last time he was at 50% or higher was maybe a month into his presidency. And then really from March 10th of 2025, his approval ratings have never been even close to being even. And so this is what we're dealing with here, is an unpopular president. That's the point that I'm making with this. The president's approval rating has not improved at all. And what we need to remember is that that's not the end of it. Excuse me, I had to wipe my nose. That's not the end. And if you are someone who supports the president, hey, that's your thing. That's fine. You've got some good news here. The good news is there's only one place for it to really go. It can only go up. And if the economy approves, if the if manufacturing improves, if all the things that he has put into place, the things he called disturbance in the economy, improves, then those numbers will probably go up. And if that happens about the time of October, September, mid to late August of this year, that's right around the time where we're going to have an election, then that's going to help out his party, the Republican Party. Now, what's interesting is that midterms are usually some sort of referendum on the president. And with that said, it's what is a good indicator of what will happen is his approval ratings. That's why I always talk about this. That's why political scientists refer to the approval ratings as much as possible, because that's where, folks, this whole election is going to really ride on. And if it's good, then his party will be rewarded. If it's bad, his party will be punished. And folks, in the last 30 years, let's just go back 30 years. There's only been 2 presidents who've actually gained seats in a midterm election because their approval ratings were above 60%. Folks, that was Bill Clinton in 1998, and then that was George Bush in 2002. Democrats in 98 gained 5 seats in the House, and folks, in 2002, Republicans gained 5 seats in the House. All of that was due to the fact that the president had very high approval ratings. We haven't seen anything like that since. Let's remember 2006 was a bad year for the Republicans. They lost over 30 seats. 2010 was a bad year for the Democrats. They lost over 60 seats. 2018 was not a good year for the Republicans. They lost over 40 seats. I mean, these were just not good election times for the president's party. And the approval rating is going to be a key indicator of that. Now, we'll talk a little bit about gerrymandering. That's going to be my main talking point. And we'll spend some time of whether or not that's actually going to make any difference. I will get into that. But that aside, what is clear is that the president's approval ratings are just simply not good. And that's first base. Second base here, we have seen that with these ongoing attempts to bring peace to the Middle East with Iran, the president has leaned heavily on his vice president, J.D. Vance. And what is now very, very clear, the president is, it seems as if, okay, now look, this is why I'm the outsider. I don't have inside information. All right. If I know something, it's usually already been known for about a week or so. So people like to tell me, well, you don't know anything. You're not on the inside. That's why this podcast is called The Outsider. That's me. It's just that my analysis and my takeaways are better than most people who do this sort of stuff. I know that sounds bragging, but it's also the truth. That aside, what it seems like, the point that I'm trying to make here is that it seems like the president has lost a little faith in his vice president. And so when that happens, this President Trump, likes to turn to his family. So he's choosing family over VP JD, where Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are going to try to negotiate with Tehran. And where are they going to do this? In the exact same place JD Vance went, Pakistan. They're going to try to send a new team in, because JD Vance just wasn't able to get the job done. He wasn't able to be that guy that the president could really lean on. Couldn't push the deal across the finish line. And so that is not sitting well with the president. And look, we have to be very clear. President Trump cares about himself and his legacy more than really anything else. He very much knows that JD Vance is going to run for president in 2028. He tried to hand him off this ball here, give you the ball when it matters most in this clutch moment. And the vice president has really fumbled it. He just made a big Leon Lett here. And that's not good for his portfolio going into 2028. Now, to his credit, most people will forget about this, but Vance won't. Neither will the president. And so it speaks to the fact that the president doesn't really see the vice president being an effective negotiator when times are coming to a close and when it's really, really necessary. So this is a bit of this is like a kick in the shin. You've tried twice now to negotiate with your best guy, with who you thought could really bring home the bacon and really bring home what you want. And it turns out that wasn't the guy. Okay. So now you're going to go to your son-in-law, who you've trusted with a whole bunch of things with Israel and other foreign countries. And now this is going to be your go-to guy. So JD Vance may feel a little wounded here, and that's all on him. It wasn't like the president didn't give him a chance, because he did. He gave him 2 chances. So that's second base. JD Vance's stock is going down a little bit. Now we round second and heading into third. The Texas House of Representatives, House Speaker Dustin Burrows, is wanting the House to study the influence of children that the gaming platform or the outlet called Roblox has. And so in particularly with what it could possibly have done with the Uvalde massacre at Robb Elementary in May of 2023. That's what they're trying to really do here. And the main question that they're looking at is, does violence in media, is that a problem? They want to, this has long been the ongoing canard is just find something else. It's got to be violence in media. It's got to be violent video games. It's got to be, all these shows that are on TV, and we got to ban those things. Well, let's remember something here. There's been some studies to suggest that most of those things that I just mentioned to you, violent video games and violence in media have a short-term effect of rage in children. And the best thing to stop that is parenting. I mean, you have to ask yourself, where's the parents here? That's been my ongoing question, is if you don't want your children to watch something, why are you letting them watch it? I know that sounds like a very simple question, but it's a question that needs to be answered. So this is where you need parental intervention, and I'm not quite sure what the House Speaker is looking for here. Well, I think I have an idea. I think he's looking for an answer to say, yep, it's violent video games. That was the cause of the Uvalde massacre in May of 2023. Not the fact that this guy got these weapons when he was 18 years old. Not the fact that he had access to these weapons inside the home, not the fact that these weapons are only meant to do one thing and one thing alone. So let's just bypass all the obvious things and find something very, very small. That's been the ongoing thing with the right on the issue of firearms. Yes. Look, I want responsible gun owners just as much as I want anything. Okay, I want people to be as responsible with their guns as much as they possibly can. But we know not everybody is. And so what happens here is you get somebody like this guy who says, I think I want a gun at the age of 16. Nope, okay, I'm not allowed to get one. Well, I'll wait till I'm 18. And he did. And this is what's happened. So maybe that needs to be looked into. But what do I know? I'm just an outsider. Now let's round third and let's head home here. There has been a report that the Texas Democratic Party chair, Kendall Scudder, isn't doing enough. And there's been some calls for him to not run for a term of his own. That's interesting because they're saying that that he has been hostile, okay, and he's made a lot of promises and they haven't been kept, and so on and so on and so on. So there's been there's one who says that this that there was a lot of urgency and deep frustration, okay, with Kendall Scudder. There were like over 36 signatures on this petition to try to tell him not to run again. Folks, this is like the dumbest thing in the world. He's going to have a challenger. There's someone coming along here who thinks that they're better at it. Look, my thing is this: the Texas Democratic Party has long been this problem. And look, I know Kendall Scudder. He was a candidate when I was a candidate back in 2018. We both have our issues with the party, and they're about the same thing. This is somebody who came as a candidate who's trying to fix something, and yet the insider crowd who don't like the fact that he's changing things and making things for the better are upset with it. And that's just what this is about. And so, look, my advice to all those people who decided or who signed this letter here to encourage him not to run again, you just need to get over it. Okay, now for those who have no idea what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to this spot, every state has a party chair, and it has a variety of tasks for it to do, and Texas is no different. Now, the Texas Democratic Party chair, both state chairs have a 2-year term. And so the party chair is elected at the state convention. And that state convention this year for the Democrats is going to be this summer, and it's going to be held in Corpus Christi. Now, it's those delegates who get to decide this. That's where the election is going to really be. So whatever. I mean, if they don't want him to be the next chair, they need his main challenger, who's another former party insider, needs to make sure that they have more delegates than him. Just bottom line. But this is the time where you don't do this crap. That's what bothers me about it. This is the time that you don't pull this sort of malarkey. This is the time where you have to start working together. But it wouldn't be a day if it wasn't for Texas Democrats to not have a problem. And they always have some sort of infight. I mean, Will Rogers once said, "I'm not a member of a professional political party. I'm a Democrat." And so that's so true here. This is ringing true to all of this. Okay, that is the trot around the bases. So thank you for joining me on those 4 key issues. Now, what else I want to get into is really this main topic. And the main topic is the gerrymandering that we've seen take place throughout the U.S. here. And folks, let's just be honest about how this happened. It happened because President Trump didn't want to lose the U.S. House of Representatives. It wasn't until late spring last year where President Trump floated the idea of a mid-decade gerrymander to the Texas House delegation. Now, quick civic lesson here. This is also known as redistricting. Redistricting happens every 10 years. At least it's mandated to. It can happen more times, but usually states just want to get it over with and just let that be it. There are certain federal guidelines that have to be met. Okay. all the districts have to be relatively equal in population, and they have to be touching throughout the entire, map. So, and you want these new maps, these new districts to match the population change. All right. So this happens in legislative sessions in all the states in years that end in 1. So the next setup for the redistricting term, the next redistricting session for all the states will be in 2031. Well, the president doesn't care about 2031. He doesn't care about 2032. He cares about 2026. And the president doesn't really like the fact that Texas and some of these other red states haven't gerrymandered the way that he wanted to. Now, you may say, okay, I've heard that term before. What's that? Gerrymandering is the manipulation of a district by the party in power in that state to maintain their particular power. That's just what it is, to maintain their dominance. Folks, both parties gerrymander. All right, let's be clear about that. No party has the moral high ground on this. Both parties do it. That said, the president wants Texas to do a mid-decade redistricting effort. Why? To, according to him, reflect the 2024 election. And look, the president did very well in Texas. Okay, I mean he won the state for a third time, but this time higher than he ever had. And so what he's wanting here is the legislature to redraw these maps that reflects his victory. And he did really well with the growing Latino population in Texas. So what's he want to do? Let's get those red Republicans, let's get those Hispanics who voted for me. I want them to have districts, and I want more power to it. Okay, so that's what happened. Why is he wanting this? Why does he want this, folks? He wants this because he knows his party might lose might lose Congress. So how do you avoid losing Congress? Well, you either achieve things, the old-fashioned way, or you rig the maps. And so President Trump is wanting the maps to be rigged. Hey, you Republican governors, call your Republican state legislatures in for a special session or put it on the agenda to gerrymander. Just that. And so this was first, when the president's team first floated this out last year, Texas House members were not exactly thrilled about this. And it was the New York Times that really broke this story. And this is the quote. This is a key quote from that piece. It reads, "The push from Washington has unnerved some Texas Republicans who worry that reworking the boundaries of Texas House seats to turn Democratic districts red, to the Republican side, by adding reliably Republican voters from neighboring Republican districts could backfire in an election that's already expected to favor Democrat. Rather than flip the Democratic districts, new lines could endanger incumbent Republicans." So this is the reason that the Texas Republicans were not exactly thrilled with this idea. There was an emergency meeting held in the Capitol, and congressional Republicans from Texas professed little interest in this, according to a person who was there. It lasted about 20 minutes and was organized by Republican Representative Michael McCall, who was from Texas. And what he was wanting was to get everybody on the same page. At the time, it was just something to think about. It was being, and there were talks that were taking place. That Times piece that I just mentioned here, it referenced discussions that were being had with the governor, Governor Greg Abbott, and then Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and the Attorney General Ken Paxton, who I'm surprised he was able to have a conversation, seeing how a lot of the time his pants is down. His pants are down for a lot of other things that have nothing to do with politics. But it didn't appear to be an actuality, as Governor Greg Abbott didn't have much desire to do any of this. He didn't really think much of it. So he thought, big deal. And so little desire or much desire, whatever, it mattered little in the end. Because what ends up taking place here is that the president makes the phone call to Abbott, tells him to do it, and that's what happened. And so there was a special session that was called, and the state legislature down here, the Texas legislature, was really the first domino to fall in all this. It kicked it off. It kicked the ball in this nationwide gerrymander line. And what it ended up doing was that it gave the Republican congressional delegation a 5-seat advantage just by looking at the maps there. Now, again, I've already talked about why this is the thing here, because we can't really forget it either. While I said it earlier, let's also reiterate. This is because the president typically loses seats in the House. So instead of trying to not lose seats in the House by campaigning and achieving things and convincing people, let's just redraw the maps. No, I want you to gerrymander. Go ahead and then Jerry and Manders. I want you to put them together. Do it for me, Texas. Come on. So what eventually happened here was that Texas sneezed. The problem with the Texas sneeze was that the entire country caught the gerrymandering bug. And after Texas came North Carolina, raise up, the Tar Heel state. Then you had the Show Me state of Missouri. Then came California, the Golden State. Then came the Buckeye state of Ohio. Then came Utah. And just this past week, as I'm recording this, here comes Virginia. Now, all eyes are going to be on Florida. Now, I feel like I'm Tim Russert back in 2000 where I'm saying Florida. It's right back to it here. Because all this has been a gerrymandering tit-for-tat silliness. Texas did it, so California's going to do it. California did it, so now, North Carolina's going to do it. Well, North Carolina did it, so now, we had to redraw some map in Utah. Well, then all that happened, and now Virginia needs to do it. It's all in this gerrymandering game. But this is, as I've said before, this has been my problem with it. Instead of going into the public square and making the case, America and the economy are better than perceived, and attempt to win the support of voters and let democracy play out, the president is more concerned with keeping power through gerrymandering. And here's what a lot of Texans often want to forget here, and they need to be reminded of this. This state started it. Texas started it. All right. And other states started to react with this. So all this reaction is leading to a question of what's really going to happen here. What will be the real partisan gain from this? Honestly, the answer is not that much. Again, as I mentioned to you before, the Cook Political Report really hammers home this particular statement as it highlighted 16 House seats as toss-ups. So really what we saw here was making not a lot of toss-up seats, not a lot of battleground seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. So that's less than 5% of the House could possibly be competitive. Folks, just a quick reminder here. Incumbents, those who seek re-election, about 90% of the time. That goes from Congress and Senate and President all the way down to City Council and all the other types of elections you could possibly have. 90% of the time, incumbents win. So that means, just by math, 10% could possibly be up for grabs. 435 members in the U.S. House. 10% of 435 is 43.5. You round up to the nearest whole number, 44. 44 seats is really the only number that both parties are paying attention to. Well, how do you make that even less? Well, you make those 44 seats smaller by securing your party's power through gerrymandering. That's how we got to 16 seats that are possibly toss-ups. Now, I will say this. There is some talk out there that South Texas, and for those of you who don't know much about South Texas out here, that a lot of Texans call the Rio Grande Valley or the Valley. There's talk that area may never vote for a Republican again. And you may say, well, why? Because of the aggressive nature of the president's deportation policy. That's why. A lot of house builders down there, a lot of businesses where they're not speaking a lick of English. And the Supreme Court has said that you can use language as a reason for arresting someone and for deportation. That is something that can be done. So a lot of businesses down there, a lot of home builders down there, a lot of labor down there. And they're also voting. The president did really well with that group. He did really well in the Valley in 2024. He really did. That might be the last time any Republican does really well down in the Valley. Okay. If we are to look at the voting behavior of this past primary here in Texas, more voters in the Valley, and we're talking like a whole bunch more, voted in the Democratic primary than in the Republican primary. So that there's numbers to back this up. But let's just be honest here. If that's the case, then the president is more screwed than he ever thought he was. If he thought he's gaining 5 more seats by redrawing the map, he forgot about how he's not well liked anymore, especially in South Texas. That's just going to hurt him. And this is the downside of gerrymandering. But let's be clear here. The gerrymandering fight doesn't end, nor does it appear to be ending at this particular moment. Because yes, we're looking right back at Florida, as it's going to figure out here next week. By the time I'm recording this, it's Friday, April 24th of 2026. And next week, it seems as if the Florida legislature is going to be called into a special session. And there's some talk that this may be on the docket. Let's also know that South Carolina was wanting to bring this up. So here's an important question that's not being asked here. How much longer will the electorate put up with this? Like, it won big in California. Okay. And everyone's like, okay, fine. California's getting back at Texas, getting back at North Carolina, and getting back at, Ohio and all that. What happened in Virginia was that this was not some big lopsided victory in favor of those maps. It wasn't. It was like 51-49 in favor. And so what I'm saying here is that this could possibly be a telltale sign that voters are getting tired of gerrymandering. And for states that have it to where the public has to vote on these things, I don't know if they're going to want to approve any more of it. And so if that has to be something taken into effect, yes, the measure passed, but there's a bigger picture here to say it barely passed. And it appears as if the people are becoming tired of being pawns in this Game of Thrones. And so it may be wise to say that's all the momentum possible that this country will have for gerrymandering. Virginia and New Jersey are often considered to be bellwether states to see where the temperature of the people are in the odd number elections that they have. Let me rephrase that. In the elections that are had in odd numbered years. There we go. Because New Jersey and Virginia, they elect governors in odd-numbered years. And that is usually a telltale sign as to where people are going to be going here in the next 12 months. Is this a good sign for the party in power in Congress and the White House? Or is it a red flag, watch out type of a moment? And usually how Virginia goes is kind of where the people will go in these odd-numbered elections, in these elections held in odd-numbered years. So this should also be a telltale sign that the people are getting tired of gerrymandering. And let's also know that it seems as if the Republicans' initial belief in the president's push to manipulate the maps for their own advantage is having some buyer's remorse. There's a piece that's out there in Politico where some lawmakers are now playing the song "I Told You So." And why? Well, look, it's because it's as if the president didn't think the other side was going to fight. I guess he just thought that it'll happen one time in Texas and we'll get the advantage and that'll just be the end of it. That no, the Democrats would never fight on this. And usually they don't. Usually it's just a tap out and that's the end of it. In the age of Trump, backing down is no longer an option for both parties. And so with that in mind, it seems as if the fight continues. And we'll see if other states that are wanting to take this on, that might think it's a good idea to take it on, don't see the writing on the wall. If they want to play the game and they think they might win by a couple tens of thousands of votes, they go ahead and try. But the polling was right on the voting on this in Virginia. The polling was right. It kept saying how tight it was going to be. It was not just a banner, wonderful victory. This was not a blowout win. This was a very, very close election. And that should be heeded by other state leaders. All right, folks, thanks for listening in to the Outsider Podcast. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. And be aware that that you can subscribe to the Outsider Podcast on YouTube, on Substack, on Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you again very, very soon.
The preceding analyses and opinions were that of Drew Landry and his alone. They did not necessarily reflect all of his podcast listeners or newsletter readers. Thank you for listening to the Outsider Podcast. Be sure to follow The Outsider on X and on Facebook. Also, don't forget to sign up to be a free subscriber to his newsletter on Substack. Just look for The Outsider. We will see you again next time.